It's safe to say Monster is pretty rapidly climbing up my list of favorite knife makers as they continue to put out knives that are cooler and more interesting than the last. And I know this is true because the knife we're looking at today is one of the coolest pieces I've handled in quite a while. Though far from the budget realm, this knife exceeded my expectations. This is the Monster Urban Grip V2. And though the name doesn't really flow off the tongue, the design and the style sure make up for it. Because right off the bat, this knife is one of the more attractive I've ever seen. This has this really cool carbon fiber inlay set in the titanium handles. And I say carbon fiber, but I only say that because that's what they call it on the product listing. But I feel like it's not really fair and not really doing this justice, as this looks so much more unique and cool than the standard carbon fiber we think of. This kind of has this navy background with these lighter blue twists and swirls, and it almost makes me think of a galaxy and very space themed. I've always said micarta has been my favorite handle material for grip and looks, but when I see stuff like this, I'm beginning to change my tune a little bit. But this knife isn't just plain style. There's actually a really usable and functional knife hiding behind all this. The action is incredible. This has a premium blade steel and it carries extremely well. But there is one drawback here. So without further ado, let's dive in and check this knife out. First, let's check out the specs. And it may surprise you, but this is actually a pretty nice sized knife. It's a little bit larger than what you'd actually expect. We have a handle and a closed length of 4.73 inches, and then we have an open length of 8.4 inches. And this is also coming in with a rather large blade at 3.67 inches. Now this is all just numbers, so what does that actually mean in the real world? Here it is next to the Kershaw Bel Air, along with the Kaiser Drop Bear. As you can see when comparing the two, this one's almost a full inch larger than them. And in hand, I didn't really realize that was that big. When we look at it next to these two, you can kind of tell the difference. Fortunately, I actually like larger knives, and this feels actually much smaller in the pocket, thankfully. So moving these two other knives aside, let's take a closer look at this one. I really want to first talk about this handle here because that's of course where your direction goes. And for good reason, because look at this, it's so cool. They say this is a carbon fiber inlay, but it doesn't really look like the carbon fiber we might instantly think of. Instead, this almost looks more organic. I was kind of playing in on the galaxy theme on the thumbnail because when you examine this more closely, I feel like it really looks like space with all these little swirls and it just looks so cool. I will say this is very smooth, so there's not really a ton of grip here on this handle, so if this was to get wet, it would become extremely slippery. Outside of the cool inlay, the rest of the knife is all made out of titanium. When we flip to the back, we have a titanium pocket clip that is unfortunately not reversible. I like that it's not just a standard clip, and instead has a little bit of its own flair. The knife also features these goldish bronze hardware throughout, so the screws, the pivot, the thumb studs, and I think it's an interesting choice. I personally think silver would have looked a little bit cleaner, but it's still a nice choice trying to bring the design and look all together. So now let's check out this blade. This is coming with a rather large blade of M390, and it lacks any branding whatsoever, which I really like. It makes it look so much more premium in my opinion. It's a rather simple blade, but has a lot of belly and it's very thin behind the edge, making this really great for slicing. So far, everything is really good here. But we have to talk about the action now, because it's really, really good. We have dual thumb studs with tons of room to get underneath them. And just a little bit of pressure, it flies out like crazy. This also has a front flipper here, and even though I'm probably the worst one on the planet when it comes to this, I can still manage it with a little bit of work and luck. It's not the easiest, but I'm really bad at this. Access to the lock bar is very easy, and once it's disengaged, it slams down shut. I never really had much experience at having a fidgety frame lock, but this one is so incredibly dialed in, and it's really satisfying and addicting. Like they really nailed the action on this knife. We've established that this is a very attractive knife, no doubt about it. But is it just a fancy showpiece, or does it actually carry and perform well? Fortunately, I can easily say that this isn't just all looks. This is actually still a high-functioning knife behind the scenes. First up, we have really great action to get to the blade. It's very easy to deploy and also shut closed. Then the blade steel here is M390, so a very tough performing steel. The blade is also insanely thin, so it's very slicey and cuts like a dream. And even though it looks extremely classy, it still performs exceptionally well. But how does it carry? Because I've had amazing knives that kind of fell flat on their face, either due to being too heavy, too awkward, or just too uncomfortable in the pocket. Though this doesn't have a deep carry pocket clip or even a reversible one, it actually carries pretty well. And even though it's a larger knife, it really doesn't feel like one in the pocket due to all the titanium, and it really carries really well. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's the price. As great as this knife is, and it really is, the price isn't. This is a very expensive knife, no two ways about it. This knife currently retails for around $260. Now that's definitely steep. In trying to justify it, we can look at the materials here with the M390 blade steel, titanium handles, these carbon fiber inlays. So it makes a little bit more sense, but it's still up there. But I just don't really feel like I'm the main target market for this knife. I tend to skew a little bit more budget focused, so I can abuse a knife and I won't cry too much if it breaks or gets misplaced. This knife is kind of more of a statement piece and almost like a little bit of functional art. Though you could absolutely put this knife through some hard work, I feel like this is almost too pretty for that. I mean, just look at how cool these inlays are. Fortunately, I use my knives in tons of different ways, and I'm also a collector, so I feel like this knife is kind of more in that vein. Now let's go over some pros and cons because there's a lot to unpack here. First, let's start in reverse and go with the negatives first so we can actually finish on a high note. So what are some negatives here? Well, the first big one is the price. $260 is a lot for a knife, this one included. And though it has some very premium materials, it's still made overseas, and it feels like it should be a little bit cheaper than its current retail price. I only say that because the knife market is absolutely flooded with so many competitors, so you really have the option to shop around. Truly, the only other nitpick for me is probably the bronze hardware in the knife, and that's just total personal preference. I just feel like this goldish color kind of takes a little bit of the focus away from the inlays on the handle, and I feel like this should be the highlight. You might love it, so again, total personal preference. So now let's switch gears and go into the positives, and there's a lot here. First, and surprise to no one, the handle inlays. These are so cool and visually striking, and I just find myself pulling it out of the pocket just to examine it. It almost has this alive quality to it, and seems to have movement trapped in the design, which I just love. Second, the materials here are all excellent. Premium blade steel, titanium, so no complaints there. Third has to be the action. This knife is so fidgety, which has come as no surprise, as every Monster knife I've ever owned has been so ridiculously smooth. So let's wrap this video up. On paper, this knife is absolutely killer. It has amazing action, great materials, and looks absolutely 10 out of 10. But unfortunately, it's a bit out of most people's price range, which is a shame as this knife and design works really so well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this guy down in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, like and subscribe to get more videos like this one, and I'll see you in the next one.